When we both see a picture of Robin Williams, do the same circuits light up? So this is why schema theory is really helpful for us. This is what we use when we first start conceptualizing our understanding. What are the contents of our understanding? Schema theory provides a nice way of bridging that gap. So we can theorize different schemas as, connecting specific parts of the brain to specific concepts, and that these would be activated when you thought about these concepts. And we could talk about schemas at any level of abstraction. So perhaps when you see Robin Williams, some abstraction for a man is activated, and that would be somewhat similar between a bunch of people. It's a very high level abstraction. But then all the thoughts that people have about Robin Williams, whether they liked him or not, or whether they thought he was funny or not, there's so many nuances between what we actually think about these things. And so we could draw this to the discussion, a pen. We probably all have very similar things in common to the pen, even though we do the actual things that are getting lit up in our brain when we see a pen is literally different. It's not going to be the same exact shape, geometric shape of what's getting activated. However, we could probably find patterns that are similar, very similar. Whereas when we're thinking about a topic some really in the weeds topic, chances are we have very different internalizations of it. Machine learning is going to find the similarities. That's all it's going to be able to do. And the question is, how do we then make sense of the similarities? And we're only going to be able to make sense of the similarities in a behaviorism type of way. We're going to have to consider, okay, we found all these similarities. What specifically is making this part of the brain activate? And then we could do a bunch of experiments around that to figure out, to really hone in on okay, what's the intuitive thing that we're trying to actually get at with this thing that seems to light up when all these people are looking at this one thing? If we find out, okay, maybe this part of the brain is associated with identifying a man, then let's show other pictures of men and see, and then let's show pictures of women and see if that type of thing holds up. I mean, it's just got to be an absolute maze for these scientists to find something that's remotely significant, right? So this is the thing I'm trying to get at in part one, that we have to keep in mind how dynamic our brains are. And since our brains, these are the very connections that are activated when we do experience the world, when we experience meaning, that means even though it feels like we're seeing the same thing every single time, there must be some difference in this experience, given the fact that there's different neurons being fired with different connection strengths and whatnot. But the real point is to realize that it doesn't feel different. And so what does that mean about the feeling of that experience? Let's now decouple the feeling of certainty that we have from what we might consider to be the contents of the concept of a pen. And I mean, we can't decouple it. That's the point. But we have to point out that there's both of these things happening at the same time. We can see how perhaps there's just a part of our brain that is signaling salience and signaling expectation and breaking expectation. And that's a very abstract process in our brain. That happens regardless of whether we're looking at the work we do during the day or the people that we talk with at night. This is a fundamental part of our brains. And we can decouple that from the very different concepts that we deal with all day. So it seems like our affective processes are fundamental for our experience. And in my mind, that has implications towards how we can think about ontology and the meaning that we experience, the meaning we understand. For me, the objectivity is a quality of our experience, that we can make sense of now as a quality of our experience. It's that feeling of certainty. It's the feeling of that thing being separate from us and being objective that really is fundamental. So it's not that the fact that we have such a high fidelity understanding of the physical world doesn't mean that the physical world is true in some ontological sense that trumps our thoughts about it. Really, the meaning is something we experience. That's where Bernardo and I would agree, that all meaning is experienced. It's coming from consciousness. So how do we rectify that with our understanding of a physical world? We're never actually experiencing the physical world. All we have is the feeling of certainty that we feel when we think about this thing. My understanding of the physical world, it was learned. It's not like I earned the view of the physical world. It's that I have internalized habitual ways of thinking about this concept of the physical world that seems to be shared amongst a lot of people, seems to be shared amongst a textbook. I find myself here with a conceptual understanding about many different things. So what do I prioritize? What aspects of my conceptual understanding do I prioritize? And Bernardo would argue that you should prioritize what feels the most true in some sense, right? The one thing that we know to be certain of is that we are conscious. I'm pointing out that, hey, once again, that's just something we're feeling certain about. Just because we feel certain about it doesn't mean it's true. It's similarly just something that we find in our conceptual understanding, which is also contingent. Like we learned about consciousness, like our understanding of consciousness is very much shaped by what people have told us, what we've learned, what we've internalized in the past. So yeah, the heuristic that I call for is we need a heuristic that points to how we can navigate effectively what arises in our experience. So what's empirical in like a very fundamental way. So how do we, if all thoughts are appearing in consciousness, how do we navigate these thoughts? Like how do I navigate what parts of my conceptual experience and understanding is right versus wrong and what that would mean? And the one thing that seems given, like according to my current understanding. So it's like, hey, I'm calling on other people to just kind of have a similar understanding, and maybe you don't. But in my understanding, the thing that's helped humans across history to get a much better understanding of what can be predictable empirically is the scientific method. Now, that's not the physical world, right? That's not our understanding of the physical world. What I know about the physical world, or the concept of the physical world, is that people have been wrong about the physical world over and over and over again. But what seems to allow people to come up with more clear understandings of things, including the physical world, is a process. It's a heuristic for what ought to be right or wrong or logical or rational or sufficiently justified, right? So that's all we have. Analytic idealism doesn't hold up because I understand the scientific method to point us to an understanding of our own conscious thoughts as arising from these dynamic neural architectures. Thus, even my understanding of consciousness being fundamental is, similarly an illusion, or, not an illusion, but it's similarly just contingent. I'm not going to argue that everything that appears in my mind is an illusion, even though you can take that argument. Like you can have that perspective. It's just that perspective isn't salient for a lot of people. Sorry, I thought that was necessary for myself to just get it all out, just so I can keep it in mind for longer. It's kind of, I wanted to exercise that muscle, even though I didn't obviously do that the most gracefully. All right, a mother who is with her baby during the critical period for emotional development and attachment is constantly teaching her child what emotions are by using musical speech and nonverbal gestures. When she looks at her child who swallowed some air with her milk, she might say, there, honey, you look so upset. Don't be frightened. Your tummy hurts because you ate so fast. Let mommy burp you and give you a hug, and you'll feel all right. She's telling the child the name of the... Okay, so this is like what I try to point out all the time. She's telling the child the name of the emotion, fright, that it has a trigger, she ate too fast, that the emotion is communicated by facial expression, you look so upset, that it is associated with a bodily sensation, a tummy cramp, and that turning to others for relief is often helpful. That mother has given her child a crash course in the many aspects of emotion conveyed not only with words, but with the loving music of her voice and the reassurance of her gestures and touch. So yeah, obviously the kid's not going to be internalizing the full story here, but maybe they're picking up on certain stimuli. They're picking up on like how the mom is reacting to a certain like the fact that the mom understand what's happening is really important. Like for a young child, you never want to look to the parent and see that the parent is in shambles or is unable to comprehend what's going on. That's terrifying. But the kid can always look to the parent to see if the parent understands what's going on. Like this type of discussion where we're really going into how neuroplasticity changes how we perceive the world. This is what makes it very intuitive for me to understand that what everyone believes to be true, what they feel to be objectively true, is ultimately subjective, yet because of our culture and because of our social encounters, these end up being pragmatically similar in populations. Now, that could be population for people that play a certain video game online. They understand things in a certain way, or they might see things in certain ways. That could differ from the population of your family's ethnicity and the cultures that come with that. And like different aspects of culture can lead to thinking about things in certain ways that are specific to those. And we're an amalgamation of all those different facets. So if everyone's got these separate experiences, these subjective experiences that do come to be similar, but we could see how they pragmatically come to be similar, what do we make of these Platonic ideas of external truths that are separate from us? Where do they exist? What are they? And like you'd have to incorporate some sort of panpsychism, or you'd have to incorporate some unaccounted for thing that we don't see in the brain currently that makes sense of some dictate that isn't something that we know to exist, like specifically our brains, the neural structures in our brains, the constraints that affect the changes of our brains, whether that be social or physical brains, whether that be social or physical. Like this is very clear cut in terms of what we're allowed to believe right now, given what we know from the science. It could be possible that there's something we haven't accounted for yet. So this isn't a saying like we know for sure that this telling is right. It's that we know for sure that this telling is like the most appropriate we could come up with given what we know.